Who want one last trip to the long trail?
Dr. Bosconovitch is one of the most underrated characters in all of Tekken. Without Dr. Bosconovitch, you wouldn't have characters like Roger, Alex, Brian, Yoshimitsu, Alyssa, Jack. This guy has influenced and directly uplifted so many different characters, and without him, the story will be drastically different. And in this video, I want to talk about everything he's done to really impact the franchise as we know it, but also what he's done and doing in Tekken 8, because a lot of people, he's not on the roster, so people don't know his presence, what he's doing. I'm expecting him to be like in the story in a major way, and as we get into the video, you will see exactly what this guy is cooking up. Going back to Tekken 2, this was his introduction. Kazuya kidnapped him and was basically forcing him to create experiments. Instruments of war is what Kazuya wanted. Roger and Alex was his two creations. He also repaired prototype Jack. Even though the experiments was kind of considered a failure by Kazuya, it still laid the groundwork for some incredible things to come. Roger may not play that big of a role in the overarching story, but if they ever decide to reintroduce Alex in his story, it is said by the time he grows up and becomes a full adult dinosaur, he will be one of the most destructive beings on the planet because he's a killing death machine T-Rex. But for Dr. Bosconovitch, at the end of Tekken 2, he was saved by Yoshimitsu, and this is when the character started to define his own destiny. As far back as Tekken 3, we get the first hints of Alyssa. It says with no sense of good or evil, he works only to somehow revive Alyssa. This character won't make an appearance until much later in Tekken 6, but you can see the groundwork already being embedded for this character. Also in Tekken 3, Dr. Bosconovitch is faced with this very mysterious illness. He gets some kind of disease and he thinks ogre blood can be the source to fix it all. He has Yoshimitsu go into the tournament to obtain that blood. I think he is successful in doing so, but the experiment goes nowhere, and Dr. Bosconovitch, he just survives by his own will, I guess. How he overcomes it isn't really explained.
Могу я чем-то помочь?
But also in Tekken 3, leading into Tekken 4, this is when he also makes an incredible, profound impact on the franchise. Brian Fury was killed, then resurrected by Abel, and then he was on the verge of dying again because Dr. Abel abandoned him. Yoshimitsu saved him and brought him to Dr. Bosconovitch, and this is when Bosconovitch extended his life just a little bit longer. Even though he couldn't really save Brian Fury, just what he was doing, putting that generator inside of him, has came back in a major way. In Tekken 8, they're really tapping into that aspect of the character. You can see with all the charge up explosions he has in his arms and his body. That is the work of Dr. Bosconovitch, not only saving Brian Fury from death, but making him stronger, more powerful. After being attacked by Brian Fury, the official Tekken of Twitter once said that he was killed. They retconned that in Tekken 8. Yoshimitsu has been hunting down Brian Fury ever since. Brian Fury is one character who we have not seen in any trailers whatsoever. If those two are to cross paths, you have to wonder what will come next.
Ой, всемогущество науки.
In Tekken 8, not seeing Brian Fury in any trailers, and also Bosconovitch, we don't know how these two characters would interact with one another, but the history that these two characters have is something that should definitely be tapped into, as well as Yoshimitsu being thrown into the pot. As you get into Tekken 6, Dr. Bosconovitch, greatest creation, Alyssa Bosconovitch, comes to life. Lars discovers her at the beginning of the game, and these two characters go on a crazy journey. Just for Alyssa's biggest secret to come alive in the end. She was designed by Dr. Bosconovitch, but she was commandeered by Jin Kazama to be one of his last lines of defense. As he's about to battle Lars Alexander, Alyssa steps in to fight him off. This is not what Dr. Bosconovitch wanted for the character, but this is just once again how the Mishimas find out something's going on and they figure out how they can manipulate it to their advantage. The same thing that Kazuya did for Roger and Alex, Jin did for Alyssa. For Dr. Bosconovitch specifically, over the last few games, you really don't see him personally. You only see his actions. You only see his creations, Alyssa, Jack. In Tekken 8, he gets a lot more hands-on and he's a lot more involved this time around. All 32 characters' bios has been officially revealed, and when you just look through there for the details, you can see Dr. Boscanovich's name scattered throughout in like 6 or 7 of the character bios. Looking at all of those bios, you can get a good understanding of what his goals are in Tekken 8. Following the rise of G Corporation's regime since the death of Heihachi at the hands of Kazuya, signaling the downfall of the Mishima Zaibatsu, Dr. Bosconovitch cooperates with Lee to provide him with the latest supplies for the Yggdrasil rebel army. He's supplying them with arms, weapons, resources, anything to help them fight off Kazuya Mishima. I would love to see, like I said at the start, for a character like Roger or Alex to be reintroduced in this as well. How cool would that be to see something that Kazuya did like 20 years ago come back to bite him? Just seeing Tekken 8 kind of being like everyone's against Kazuya Mishima, I think doing something like that too would be interesting. Dr. Bosconovitch also helps Lee develop the enormous flying boat Vidpnir. We've seen a few instances of this in the Chapter 1 campaign. We don't know what kind of defenses or attack measures this has, but it's basically a giant plane, like an AC-130. Lee and Dr. Bosconovitch both work together to create this, and that is very powerful because this is like their command ship. It's like a military base that can move, a Death Star basically. And another thing that Dr. Bosconovitch specifically created in Tekken 8 are motorbikes. Now I think we've seen Lars using one of these. In the trailer, he rides a motorcycle, jumps off, and kicks Jack. I think that's exactly what they're talking about. This is literally Dr. Boscanovich's creation being used on the battlefield. And for his friend Yoshimitsu, he also constructed his armor. You know, Yoshimitsu destroys it every single time he leaves, and when he comes back, there's a new one waiting there for him. And this is why I say Dr. Bosconovitch is one of the most underrated characters ever. He's doing so many different things all at once. Armor, a boat, bikes, weapons, resources, even for Alyssa. She begs him to check for a malfunction as she is confused by her emotional responses. Whenever she's speaking with Lars, she starts to feel all kind of ways, and that never happened before throughout her whole entire existence, and she thinks it's an error. Dr. Bosconovitch updates her software and tells her, this is no malfunction, this is your free will at play. All of these things that he's been doing over the game's lifespan is massive. For many different characters, for many different games, and in Tekken 8 we have no clue how it's going to play out. The boat Vidpnir, the resources, Alyssa, Yoshimitsu, all of these characters and all of these things are working together to take down Kazuya Mishima, and I just wonder one thing. Will the Doctor himself, Bosconovitch, show up either as DLC in the story? What role will he play personally, hands-on? He's always in the background, not really taking credit, not really known, but he is incredibly instrumental in everything that's taking place. And to see the Doctor in action one more time would be amazing. The character was literally retconned from death to life. Make that the most impactful you can and really get the most out of it. All of these things here is why I think Dr. Bosconovitch is literally one of the most underrated characters in all of Tekken. He has done so much from Tekken 2 all the way to Tekken 8, and you wouldn't have some of these characters without him. Yoshimitsu, that guy would have no armor. Brian Fury, he would be gone. Alyssa would not be alive. How would Jin be stacking up against Kazuya Mishima and G Corporation without all of the resources Dr. Bosconovitch has been supplying? This guy is the mastermind behind the scenes, and I would love for him to come to the forefront, maybe as a DLC character, but definitely in the story and just participate.